So I'm going to talk to you today about creating habitat at low cost on a budget. So before I begin, a little bit more about me. I have been involved with the program since its inception back in 2006. I've been a volunteer as well as a contracted technician for about 10 years. I really believe in what we do in this program. I was a birder. I am a birder. I have been a bird watcher for about 40 years. And when I moved into my house 28 years ago, I was really paying attention to the birds in my yard. I kept a bird list, and at the time it was about 15 species. And over the years, I've removed invasive species, planted a lot of natives in my yard, and added some water features. And now, 28 years later, my bird list is up to almost 50 species. So that's what I've seen pass through my yard. Not all of them live here all the time, but it's very rewarding. I find supporting bird populations to be valuable because they are a good um, sign of how the ecosystem is doing otherwise. They're a good indicator species. So let me figure out how to do this. Here we go. So today I'm going to tell you about the Backyard Habitat Certification Program itself, how it works. Then we'll talk a bit about why is building habitat important in the first place. Talk about things that you can do in your own yard and tips for doing so on a budget. So at the end, I will give you some resources, free resources that you can do more research if you'd like. So the Backyard Habitat Certification Program is a partnership between Portland Audubon and the Columbia Land Trust. I'll give you a little bit about its history. I was involved at the beginning as a volunteer in Portland Parks. The program actually was a grassroots program that started when some of us were removing invasive species in Portland Parks and recognized that though we may do great work in the park, the adjoining properties still had invasive plants that would creep in. So we decided to engage some of the neighbors into removing the invasives on their property, and that's how the program basically started. In 2009, Portland Audubon came into the picture and made the program citywide, which was a very big step at the time. Now it is not only in the city of Portland, all of Multnomah County, it's also in Washington County, Clackamas County, Clark County, and did I get them all? 4 counties. So we're really proud. There are now over 7,300 participants in the program, and it's going strong. So it's a very exciting program. Portland Audubon, just to give you a little bit about our co-managers of the program, Portland Audubon was founded in 1902. It's one of the largest, most respected, and oldest conservation organizations in the state. So they are doing conservation and advocacy work. And in addition to that, they have an education program for adults and kids. They run a summer camp. They have a wildlife care center that rehabilitates wildlife from the region. And they maintain a sanctuary in their property on Cornell Road in Northwest Portland. They also support, or they are supported by about 500 volunteers who work the program and help to keep it going. So Columbia Land Trust, our other partner, conserves and cares for vital lands, waters, and wildlife of the Columbia River region through sound science and strong relationships. So they've conserved over 50,000 acres in the region between the Dalles and the Pacific Ocean, and they help conserve by purchasing or helping landowners make conservation easements on their properties. And they work with farmland, working forests, as well as ranches to do this work. So the mission of the Backyard Habitat Program is to provide tools, resources, and recognition for gardening sustainably and creating wildlife habitat. it fits in with the missions, within the missions of both of our partnering organizations, because it restores habitat in suburban and urban areas, expanding the size and increasing the value of these healthy habitats within the city, and creates wildlife corridors. So because of the number of participating properties, as I said, we're over 7,300 at this point. The small sanctuaries that people create in their yard create connectivity with other small sanctuaries and then into natural areas that have already existed throughout our region. How does the program work? So this is the nitty-gritty. I will explain that if you're interested in the program, you sign up on our website. There's a small one-time fee of $35, though we are about to implement a sliding scale because they do not want the cost to be a barrier for people to get involved. It should start at $5, and that should be up and running pretty soon. Once you sign up, you will be assigned a habitat technician like myself. You will set up an appointment with them. During COVID, we are doing things a little bit differently, but under normal circumstances, they would visit your yard and walk through your yard with you, identify any invasive plants you might have, talk about natives that you might have and then that you can add to your yard, and then identify other things that you can do, which I will explain the other elements of the program as I go along. So they will leave a packet with you that has a bunch of resources, including coupons like the native plant discount booklet you'll see on the left side there. There are 10 local nurseries, native nurseries, some not native only, but nurseries that sell native plants that give discounts for our program participants. You will also get an in-progress sign if you would like it. This sign is nice because it helps you explain to your neighbors what you're doing, and actually creates conversation between neighbors. There is a customized site report that you get after your site technician leaves. They'll write up the report, send it to you. It will give you some plant lists that will help you for different target areas of your yard, and will give you the steps that you need to take if you are interested in certification. And not everybody is interested in certification. The goal of the program is to increase and improve your wildlife habitat. If you would like to get certified, we certainly won't discourage you. So after that, there's follow-up support. So for no additional costs, we do make follow-up calls. We offer consultations down the line. There's no time limit on your getting certified if you wish to. So when you are ready, when you think you've done the things that were identified to get you to certification, you will be assigned a volunteer who will come to your house and look at what you've done, make sure you've done the things that were recommended to you, and then give you a certification sign. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see the certification sign that people very proudly display, as you can see in the right-hand side. The recognition that's mentioned here is we have a Facebook page and we do post pictures of people happily holding their signs if you want. Additional benefits, some memberships and coupons are added when you get certified. Upgrades, whenever, if you start at silver, you, for no extra cost, can get to gold or platinum certification, which I'll explain. And every 3 years, we do ask that you renew your certification, which means we make sure that you still have removed your invasives and kept them out of your yard and continue to do the other things that you have implemented. So the 5 elements of the program, I will just go through them quickly here, are removing noxious plants, planting locally native plants, which are native to Portland, and I'll explain that further. Reducing or eliminating your use of pesticides. As we all know, pesticides are not good for us or our pets or children or the native wildlife. So we'll talk about that. Supporting wildlife, finding ways to be stewards for your wildlife in your yard. And then managing stormwater on site, that would be managing rainwater on your property. Who can participate in the program? So we work with sites 1 acre or smaller, which is most people. The types of sites we work with are private yards, both rented and owned. So if you get approval from your landlord, we encourage renters to work in their yards. Multifamily housing complexes, schools and places of worship. We frequently work with businesses and nonprofits who have property around their buildings, community sites, and more. So certification levels, there are varying increasing levels of commitment to doing the parts of the program. We begin with silver, which is the easiest, and move up to gold, and platinum is the hardest. So you'll see as we go along, there are, under each of the elements of the program, there are increasing numbers of things that you would do. So why is building habitat important? And it's really important to recognize that the Portland metro area is at the confluence of 2 major rivers, the Willamette and the Columbia, and therefore it creates a tremendous amount of biodiversity in this area. It's also along the Pacific Flyway, which is a migration route up the West Coast. So it provides critical habitat to 367 species of animals and 219 bird species that migrate through. So those animals include fish and amphibians, reptiles and mammals, and insects, tens of thousands of insects as well. Why are our populations of animals in decline? So fewer trees in wild areas due to development. We all see that as developments go in, natural areas go out. Climate change caused by fossil fuels, climate change, increasing temperatures, changing and making some habitats inhospitable for our native plants and animals. Introduced species of plants and animals which can displace the natives, other human hazards, and in our yards, things that you can see and have some, take some responsibility for are cats. Cats are one of the domestic house cats are one of the largest causes of injured cats being brought into the Wildlife Care Center at Audubon. I think the second largest is bird collisions in windows. This is a sad situation, but a lot of birds see reflections of trees and don't realize that it's clear window, and they will fly into glass. So sometimes they're just shocked for a little while, but many times it will kill them. But that is the second largest population of animals that are brought in, birds in particular, brought into the Wildlife Care Center from those injuries. Pesticides are clearly a problem for bees and other wildlife, also for humans, and invasive plants. So they again displace our native plants and animals. So very sadly, about 25% of our common bird species are in decline. And according to a national report that came out from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in 2019, the number of birds, the population of birds in North America has declined about 25%. That's about 3 billion birds over the last 50 years. And common Oregon bird species have had more than half population declines also during the past 40 years. And those include some of our more common birds, including Western meadowlark, which is our state bird. So more than 50% of the population has disappeared. Also bees, approximately 30 species of bees are labeled as possibly extinct or critically imperiled. And this has been studied by the Xerces Society, which is a local organization that is national, and they study insects and invertebrates, and they have found a huge decline in bees, which are one of our more important pollinators because they are such efficient pollinators. Does my backyard matter? So we look at our small yards and we wonder, can it really make a difference? But Residential lots make up about 40% of the urban landscape in Portland. And you can see in this little map that the green areas are vegetated yards and naturescaped yards. Naturescape yards by themselves may not mean much, but when they're connected to other yards, they create wildlife corridors and add those to natural areas that already exist, and you've got connectivity. So that's what we're looking for, places where birds and insects can pass through our urban areas. How can you help in your own backyard? So that's what we're here for. First step, and the first step of the program, is removing noxious weeds. So noxious weeds are weeds that spread rapidly and dominate areas, displacing other plants. Not all non-native plants are noxious weeds or invasive weeds. Many of our locally known plants that are favorites of people do not spread, and they're not a problem. But noxious weeds can change the native ecology. They can inhibit forest regeneration. They can shade out new growth of tree seedlings. They can contribute to soil erosion because, as I'll show you, they do not have as deep a root system as native plants. They deplete soil nutrient content, and they can also kill nearby plants by producing chemicals that affect the mycorrhizae under the soil, in the soil, and cause other plants to die or not be able to grow near them. So the next step is planting native plants. We encourage planting Portland plants that are native to Portland, and I will explain that in a moment. Planting native plants at, 5% of your plantable area of your yard could get you silver certification. And that goes up 15% of your plantable area to gold, and 50% of your yard planted with natives can get you platinum certification. So here we go, native to where? We want people to remember that native plants can be native to the United States or native to the state of Oregon. But what we're looking for is plants that are most suited to our region. So we use the Portland plant list, which is a list created by the city of Portland to identify plants that were here before European colonization. These are plants that are best suited to the conditions in our area. So they're best suited to soil temperature, elevation, and weather conditions in the Portland region. So we're not looking for plants that do best in the Cascades or on the coast. We really want lower Willamette Valley plants. So those are the plants that count for our program. Why plant native species at all? So we are all connected through a food web, and most of our insects depend on native plants to survive. Insects actually have co-evolved with plants that the plants will be food for their young. So they will lay their eggs on native plants, and the young will eat from those plants. So without those plants, their young will have nothing to eat. So then most 96% of terrestrial birds are gonna feed on those insects. So birds need protein to feed their young, and they look for insects or nuts and seeds. 96% of them will feed on those insects. So they depend on the insects. Then 10% of small mammals eat only insects, and all of adult amphibians and most reptiles will eat insects in addition to some other small animals. So we are all connected through this food web and all depend on those animals below us in the web. In our program, we ask people to plant in layers. So the more layers you plant, the more wildlife diversity. If you look on the right-hand side, there's overstory. This is in a healthy forest, an overstory of tall trees, understory of smaller trees, large shrub layer, small and medium shrub layer, and then ground layer. And if you look on the left side, these are some examples of birds that will feed and nest and forage in different parts of the canopy. So we ask that people plant at least 3 native canopy layers in their yard, and that can increase to 4 or 5 if you want higher level of certification. So those birds we're talking about have different feeding behaviors. There are birds that are ground feeders that will only forage on the ground. There are seed and berry eaters, foliage gleaners, aerial foragers, and predators. So we're trying to provide a diversity of vegetation layers to support the diversity of bird feeders and nesters. So, reduce or eliminate pesticide use. Our program recommends that you look at Grow Smart, Grow Safe, which is a wonderful website and app that identifies it identifies products based on the chemicals in them. They rate them in toxicity from red, highest level, down to yellow, down to green, green being the least toxic types of products that you can use in your yard. So we ask our participants to look at that and make decisions to use less toxic or not toxic at all products. There is a program within Metro that will give you this cute little sign saying pesticide-free zone if you take their pledge saying what we're asking you to do, eliminating pesticide use or at least reducing it. Supporting wildlife. So being a good wildlife steward could be multifaceted. There are a lot of choices in this category. We ask that you provide some kind of water for birds. Water is the key to life. Water is important for all wildlife, humans, insects. So even having a small dish in your yard with water in it is going to bring in birds. You'd be very surprised how quickly birds find water. Other things going around here counterclockwise would be bird nesting boxes and or bat houses. If you live in an area where bats might live, having insect nesting boxes, which in this case are for solitary native bees called mason bees, then having a snag of some type or dead wood, standing or felled dead wood is good for wildlife. Insects will start to eat from it, and birds might find cavities or create cavities in it in which to nest. The lower right hand is the catio. So we are really asking people to keep their cats indoors. And if not, you can create outdoor sanctuaries for your cat where they can enjoy the outdoors but not become coyote food or eat birds themselves. Then planting a meadow, planting a pollinator meadow is a wonderful way to support wildlife. And the upper right-hand corner shows someone who is putting decals or drawing on a window to create an opaque surface so that birds know to not fly into it. And then lastly in the center is reducing nighttime lighting, especially during migration season. Birds that are migrating get distracted, disoriented by upward facing light. So we ask that people in our program and others reduce light in their yards and have it pointing down if they need to have it. There is a program at Audubon called Lights Out Portland, and they work with homeowners as well as businesses to try to get them to turn off lights during migration season. So again, 1, 2, or 3 of these would get you different levels of certification. Then another element is managing stormwater or rainwater. And the purpose here is to slow down the flow of water on our property so that the water drains through our yards and then goes into waterways rather than rushing over impervious surfaces like roads where it picks up pollutants and rushes quickly and causes erosion as it goes into local streams and rivers. So things you can do, again, large trees, having a large tree over 30 feet has a root system that will help absorb some of that water. Disconnecting downspouts were appropriate. So having your downspouts from your roof come into a place in your yard that can absorb that water. A rain garden is a further use of that disconnected downspout where you would, I'll talk about it later, dig down in your yard and plant plants that can handle their roots or feet in the water when it rains, and then can handle when it dries out. So that's another way to use the water coming off your roof. Having an eco roof is not as common. That is up in the upper right-hand corner. It is not easy for some people because you need a good structure to hold it. Restoring soil in the lower center, you see a bird. Oh, that's leaving leaves in place. So leaving leaves in place are basically to create soil and then create foraging areas for birds. Water conservation, trying to turn off lawn sprinklers. We do not need to have green lawn. It will come back if it dies off, and we encourage conservation when possible. And then eco-friendly yard care practices. We do ask that people try not to use gas-powered lawn tools. So again, 1, 2, or 3 of these will get you different levels of certification. This is what I was talking about stormwater and invasive plants. They do not have very thick root systems, and they don't go as deep as native plants. So having natives helps to absorb some of the water. It also improves stability for eroding slopes. So now let's get down to ways to save money as you build habitat in your yard. Basically, use resources you already have on your site. If you have a dish, you can turn it into a bird bath. If you have leaves, leave them in their beds, or rake them into a particular bed where you don't mind the leaves piling up. Making piles of sticks is a great insect habitat. There are lots of free resources. Chip drop you can call, and they will drop off the chipped vegetation, chipped trees from work that they've done. Craigslist, plant swaps, these are all ways that you can get inexpensive or free plant material. Putting the right plants in the right place basically saves you from losing plants. Making the choice to put a plant where the conditions are right for it will allow it to survive and thrive. Taking one step at a time, working at your own ability. These are really important. People should not feel like they need to jump into this full force. You can take one step at a time, try something out, see how it works. You don't need to plant your whole yard, as we say. Starting with 5% of your yard is a really great beginning, and moving up over the years from there. There is no time limit, by the way, for certification in our program, so there is no rush. Planting during fall weather is important because the plants will have time to get water during the winter, and their root systems will get established before spring. So it is the best time when they're in dormancy to plant. That will also save you from plant mortality. Ask questions and ask for help. We have participants who are thrilled to talk to people about what they are doing and find ways they can help you by sharing plans, sharing ideas, giving you advice. So we really encourage you to look at our Friends of Backyard Habitat group on Facebook. So free and discounted plants, we give you coupons, as I said, for 10 plant nurseries in Portland that have varying discounts that they will give you, but there are also local native plant sales. So in our e-newsletter and on the Facebook page, we frequently post other organizations, sometimes fundraisers, sometimes not, but local native plant sales that often have low-priced plants. Seeds are a great way to get started without having to pay for plants. You can get seeds from people who are already naturescaping and who have collected seeds in their own garden, or you can purchase seeds, which really are the least expensive way to go. Free plants, again, from others, but also propagate at home from cuttings, collected seeds, or plant swaps. So cuttings are, I will talk about this a little later, cuttings are a really inexpensive way to get plants from friends and neighbors' plants or from your own. So if you get some plants that are doing well, you can take cuttings from them. Ask your local soil and water conservation district for free plants. Often they have programs where they are giving out free plants, and also Friends of Trees. You can purchase at low cost trees through Friends of Trees. So growing native plants from seed, these are just a few of the plants that are easy to grow from seed. They're listed on the right side, but there are many. Yarrow, California poppy, fringe cup, checker mallow, farewell to spring, blue-eyed Mary, blue wild rye, California fescue, large-leaf avens, heel-all. These are all great native plants, easy to grow from seed. And then from hardwood cuttings, as I mentioned, you can go out to your garden about now or to a neighbor's who says it's okay and take cuttings of a small branch, like a pencil width in diameter, and take about 3 feet of it and cut it and then stick it in the ground about a foot deep in your own yard where the soil is moist. And by spring, you should start to get some new growth. The roots will have time to establish. It's really better to do this in December, not February, but you can still do it with some success. These are some plants that do well by cutting, though there are many others. And best bang for your buck is best plants that provide for more wildlife species. So some plants support a greater number of species of wildlife. So you would get more quality from them if you planted, let's say, a Gary oak. A Gary oak is our native white oak, and 34 species of wildlife will use the Gary oak either for nesting or food or protection. So there are a few species here listed that you can see support 30 or more species, and those would be good choices. Planting for wildlife sometimes is it's important to recognize the way you plant. So planting in groupings and planting in hedgerows. So a hedgerow is a linear group of plantings with ground cover, small shrubs, tall shrubs, or even up to trees with different layers that create a thicket. And these thickets are wonderful places for birds to nest and to forage. So some of our local birds, warblers, sparrows, and towhees and goldfinches love thickets. So we encourage people planting, especially along property lines, are a good place to plant a native hedgerow. Planting for pollinators. So flower constancy, not consistency, but constancy, is a way to, is the fact that some bees and insects will go from plant to plant of the same species, and that makes them more efficient pollinators. They will, on one foraging visit, go, let's say, to a lupin and look for another lupin. So when we plant for pollinators, we suggest that you plant in groupings so that the bees have more than one plant to go to pollinate and to look for nectar. Planting around and leaving bare ground and rock is really good for insects because a lot of our native insects are ground nesters, so they need bare ground in which to dig their nests. Yellow and white flower preference, so knowing what you're trying to attract. Some bees and birds have different flower color preferences. Shrubs with hollow stems. Planting plants that have hollow stems, like the red elderberry, have stems that would house some native bees that like to nest in tunnels. varied bloom times throughout the season. As I'm going to show in the next few slides, planting plants that will bloom through all of the growing seasons from spring to fall really provides for pollinators in your yard all year long. So spring plants for pollinators, these are some of the more common early and mid-spring plants. Lupin, currant, yarrow, farewell to spring, heel-all, camas, blue-headed gilia, California poppy. These are all wonderful early spring plants that provide for pollinators and for you, lots of color in your garden early in spring. Then summer plants, this is a variety of summer plants that will grow in most people's gardens, sometimes will spread in people's gardens as well. Douglas spirea, fleabane, foamflower, columbine, checker mallow, snowberry. And then fall plants. Fall is the hardest time to provide for pollinators because there aren't as many choices, but these are some of the common ones that are easy to grow in your yard here in Portland and surrounding areas. I talked about providing for birds, but this is a very inexpensive way, as I mentioned, to provide water that brings birds in. Even the kitchen dish can become a bird feeder. We only need a half to an inch of water to have birds walk in it and be able to bathe and feed. It also provides for insects and butterflies that like to drink from your bird feeder if you put in some rocks or things, as you'll see on the right, that make their some standing areas so that they can stand around the water and not in it. Don't add anything to the water like salt or soap, and clean the container and change the water regularly. We do ask that you clean regularly, that you hose out the dish, and that's partly for reducing mosquito egg laying, and then also for reducing disease among the birds that might bathe in your bird bath. Keeping your cats safe inside. As I said, Audubon has a program with the Feral Cat Coalition called Cats Safe at Home. We do encourage people to keep your cats in for their sake as well as the birds' sake. There are lots of coyotes in our area, and there are frequently signs that we see in our neighborhoods of cats gone missing. So there are inexpensive ways using salvage materials to create an outdoor space for your cats so it gets to enjoy being outdoors but remains safe, itself safe, and safe for bird and small mammals. Removing lawn and impervious surfaces is a very inexpensive thing you can do to improve your habitat. You don't think about it, but lawn is actually not the best wildlife habitat. It is a monoculture of single species. It does not provide much, and it also does not absorb much water. It often creates a barrier to water absorbing down, and water will sheet off of it. So we ask people, if possible, to remove unwanted lawn, and you can do so by lasagna mulching, which is a great technique that's really inexpensive, using just mulch and newspaper and cardboard, covering up your lawn, making layers, piling it up, and then you kill the lawn and create planting beds. So you can then plant a variety of plants that will have a variety of plant root depths, and change a very basic boring lawn to a beautiful planting bed. Depave is an organization in town that helps businesses, I don't think private homes, but helps businesses remove parking lots and impervious surfaces just for that reason. So a rain garden is created from a downspout that you disconnect from the sewer, and this is only useful in and possible in some parts of town, so you need to check. There are free workshops that are offered by the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. You can now, I believe those are all online. The cost is free. the first thing that they will have you do is check your soil permeability level. So they want to make sure that your soil will absorb the water and that it won't just sit as it does in some parts of Southwest. It sits on clay and will not drain at all. So you do need to check soil permeability by digging a hole. Oh, and then digging the hole for the rain garden, digging a hole about 1.5 feet deep, and they will go through the steps in creating the rain garden for you. But these are all things you can do for free. Adding the compost and native plants, if you get your plants from plant swaps, etc., you're really reducing your cost. You can get free rocks from Craigslist to put at the bottom of it to improve the drainage, and for $60 or less, you have a very nice little habitat in front of or in the back of your yard. Results. So we have lots of happy people in our program, as you can see from these pictures. We have people, as you can read here, who have found it being in the program has opened up relationships with neighbors, that people start talking to each other over the fence because they really like what someone else is doing in their yard. People work together to remove invasives that might be creeping over the fence into their neighbors. And then also people start to see an increase in diversity of birds in their yards. So if you are not yet a birder, you may become a birder because you will start paying attention to the animals and birds that come through your yard. So I am here for questions and comments. I am going to have one more slide, which will show you our website and then the 2 Facebook pages. One is the official one of our program, and the other is created by, as I said, some of our supporters who are very enthusiastic and love to share ideas and plants. So I encourage you to look at both. And I will end here, and then we will
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So we do have some questions and chats that we will get to. All right, Robin, are you here with us? Give Robin just a second to link back in here. All right, I'm not sure if Robin can hear us, but Robin, we are ready for you with a few questions.
Hello, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. No need to apologize. I've been there too, like trying to find buttons and whatnot. Okay, Robin, so we have a few questions, so we'll just start working our way through those. So first up we have, it says, I did a cardboard chip drop in the fall. I'm planning to plant in late March. The cheapest place to acquire planting soil, that's the question, is where's the cheapest place to acquire planting soil, especially when hoping to seed medium large sections as a wildflower meadow?
Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly where to get soil. If you're in the program, we do have discounts at ProGrow in Sherwood. I personally have not compared prices of other places, so I guess I don't have a good answer for that. You can often find soil on Craigslist as well as manure, which you might want to mix into your soil a bit. So that is something that you could get, or a place that you could get less expensive soil. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer. We don't, other than the company that we get discounts from, we don't recommend anybody in particular.
Okay, thank you. And we have a few more coming in here. How should I amend a new spot where I removed lawn?
Well, that depends on what your soil is naturally. Again, some people have really solid clay under their grass, their lawn. Sometimes lawn areas become really compacted. So I would consider adding some compost and planting soil and mixing it in before you go ahead and plant in that area. If you remove lawn, I'm assuming you did it by scraping it off and not by lasagna mulching, as I had mentioned in this talk. I hope I answered that.
The mature size of Snowberry seems really varied. How to plan for spacing correctly?
Well, different people like different density of their native plantings, so there's no formula for that. Snowberry will be very varied in size. You can also, it handles a very strong prune back if you decide it's getting too large. But as far as the planting distances, they are going to find their way. They're going to spread and fill in. So if you want to control that, you can either add more to make it more of a thicket or pull some out as they start coming up. So there's no, as I said, there's no real formula for that.
Right, and then it says, I live in Washington County and signed up in December of 2020. About when could I expect the initial visit? So do you have any kind of guess on timeline?
I don't have an in on that. I have heard that they're moving slowly because of COVID. As I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, because of COVID, the technicians are doing some on-site, but not present with the homeowner. So I think that slowed things down a little bit. My guess is it could be a couple of months in Washington County. We had a really long wait list when we opened up service there. And if you would like calling our program directly, you could get the answer to that, or writing to them. I could also get the answer for you and get back to you if you would like.
Okay, a couple more here. Is it okay to have drip irrigation set up for my garden while being in the program?
That's a great idea. Drip irrigation is a great solution because you're not wasting as much water. With more of a spray type of irrigation system, it's the most efficient. So yes, that would be great. When we plant native plants, the point is to not have to water them if you're planting the right plant in the right place in your yard. So if you're talking about native plantings, the best thing to do is water them by hand for 2 or 3 years to get them established, and then not have to worry about watering at all. But if they're non-native plants or you've got a vegetable garden, yes, drip irrigation is the best thing you can do.
And it looks like one more. If anybody has more questions, go ahead and keep them coming. But right now it looks like we're on our last one. So Robin, do you have any suggestions on balancing the natural habitat and space for children to play? You have, like, I don't know, prototypes, pictures, ideas, anything like that?
There are some great websites, and there's a whole movement for nature play. And I guess the biggest problem is trampling plants, having an area where it's okay to compact the soil where kids are playing, but having areas where hopefully you can keep your kids from not trampling. I guess there are certain plants like kinnikinnick, which would be a great plant for planting in an area where kids might be playing. It can stand up to some foot traffic, but I guess it's not conducive. Most native plantings are not conducive to walking on them. So having pathways, and kids love to go exploring in the woods, as many of us know from our own experience. And so having pathways where they can see the plants to the sides of where they're walking, but not be trampling on top of them. That would be the best way to incorporate nature play places with planting native naturescaping.
That makes sense. Do you have, there's one more just kind of comment that I think might be helpful to touch on is for smaller areas. So if folks have maybe a townhome or something where they don't have larger yard space and are finding it challenging to attain the platinum level certification, do you have some specific ideas for those smaller areas where they want to be able to get a platinum certification?
Well, I appreciate people wanting to get higher levels of certification. It's wonderful. I don't think that should be your goal. You can do all those things to get platinum in a townhouse type of place. You'd be, the ones that I have visited, I think you'd be moving into other people's parts of the yard, if that's how it works. So you may not have as much control over that. So doing the best you can with the space that you have is really the best thing you can do. You may not have the control over all of it. Did that answer that one?
I think so. Yeah, it was just kind of more of a comment and ideas of like, you can't plant a 30-foot tree, maybe. That there's just some more challenges.
I see. I just went back and read that. So as far as the tallest level of overstory, that is correct. You, in some cases, if you have the room for that planting, we do give credit for the intention. So if you plant a large tree sapling, you do get credit for it. But yes, if you're in a place where the landscaping can't support having a large tree there, that is going to be out of your, you're not going to be able to do that. So I'm sorry for that if it really matters to get platinum, but when people see your sign, I'm not sure that most of us notice whether or not it's silver, gold, or platinum, but having the sign is I think the goal for a lot of people.